Thank you all everyone for being here today to talk about project management, indispensable for Vision India. It's a pleasure to have each of you experts on the panel to talk about this, and maybe we can kickstart today's conversation by getting opening comments in terms of where each of you see project management playing a role for a better India and for a future India, and maybe I could start with you now.
Yeah. The way I look at project management is as a part of the Make in India initiative. And as part of the Make in India initiative, we have a vision where we are looking at India having manufacturing share as a part of GDP of 25% by the year 2022. And as a part of that initiative, then we have worked out what are the various initiatives that need to be taken, what are the various ways we can go about it. So we have the key feature of this is to build a world-class infrastructure, to foster innovation as a part of the startups, and also to make it easy for business to work. And the last part of it is to encourage foreign direct investment, because that's what will bring in the global best practices to India, where we can look at a transfer of technology and improvement of systems and processes. So that is how I look at project management.
Raj?
Project management to us is that bridge which connects the vision to the outcomes. And therefore, that is the most crucial element if you want to get your desired outcomes. So if you look at Vision India today, we are talking about the various initiatives by the Modi government. And these are initiatives, but if you need to see the outcomes, and like the outcomes you mentioned now, unless you have proper project management processes, people, and the monitoring of the same, you will not achieve those results which is desired. Therefore, more than ever before, I think today is when project management is extremely crucial for India to achieve its vision.
India is at a stage of growth in its history which could lead to potentially breakthrough growth. It's already growing at more than 7%, but if it gets its act right, it can grow much more substantially, and it will lead to inclusive growth. One of the key requirements for that is significant investment in infrastructure as well as government programs like Make in India, Digital India, Swachh Bharat. All of these programs together with the infrastructure development, if they are managed well to lead to the business outcomes, will actually enable this breakthrough growth. But unfortunately, the past track record in some of these projects, particularly on the infrastructure side, we've seen challenges, and we've seen many projects which today are stalled or are delayed. In fact, more than 30% of projects which are nearly 1,000 projects which were studied are actually delayed. But on the other hand, we have situations like the Delhi Metro or the iconic projects like Delhi or Mumbai airports, or the Aadhaar program, or for that matter, ISRO's program for the Mars. All of these have been executed on time and within cost, in fact, low cost. So how is it that we have this dichotomy? The answer really is proper program management, which can enable transfer of these islands of excellence to make it a discipline, which can make it a competency for the country, not just for some organizations within the country.
Sure. Karen.
Well, I'd like to look at project management from the perspective of smart cities. Smart cities are perhaps the most ambitious program announced by the Prime Minister. Now, unlike the smart cities that are being conceived in different parts of the world, where they are basically mint fresh cities that are being built ground up, India is looking at a different model. India is looking at retrofitting existing cities. So here it means that we're not going to really see marquee infrastructure springing up with huge billions of dollars of investment, but what we're going to see is infrastructure that's really necessary for the common man. Infrastructure that really maximizes the potential of every citizen of India. So we are talking about metro systems. We are talking about low-cost housing. We're talking about water and sewerage infrastructure. We're talking about control and command centers. We're talking about things that actually make sense on ground. Now, in this context, what's very important as far as project management is concerned is the entire Smart Cities program is a mission, which is actually a program that is perhaps heuristic in nature. I mean, you can't really cast it in stone. I mean, it has to change according to the requirements. And this is controlled perhaps even by the larger economic scenario of the world. Now, if you look at the smaller projects inside the smart cities that I just talked about, small infrastructure that's coming up, here the project management skills are extremely necessary because a lot depends on the geopolitical realities of this project. A lot depends on how we bring stakeholders in. A lot depends on how we stop PILs from being filed. A lot depends on how citizens root for an infrastructure that really makes enormous amount of sense. So we are talking about mandatory skills, mandatory requirement for project management skills where seamlessly infrastructure can be provided. So heuristic program management, cast in stone project management, and everything to be seen through the lens of project management, which is perhaps the best thing to happen now.
Sure.
Historically, the projects, visionary projects, the difference between stated outcomes and achieved outcomes, if there is one factor which has caused the difference, is because of project management. Not having a project management office, and any visionary project requires one project or several projects which should have an objective in terms of time, cost, quality, steered by a project management organization, competent resources with well-defined goals and objectives which lead towards this goal. And that is where we have gaps. We have a huge skill gap in India. Today what we have is something like 100,000 project managers, and what we require in the next 5 to 7 years is something like 300,000 project managers. And here the investment has to come from industry in terms of our own development and also from the government initiatives. It's somewhere where a lot of collaboration is required, a lot of engagement is required. Then only it is possible to ensure that the skill gap is achieved, and then we will be in a position to achieve the stated objectives what we have all these visionary programs.
Sure.
Project management is actually a means to the end. We are a country of 1.3 billion people, out of which majority is of the younger population, and they have aspirations. They want to grow, they want to learn, and they want to move ahead in life. So growth is inevitable for a country like ours. We can't be a stagnant nation. We have to make sure that projects like whether it's Make in India or Smart Cities or Housing 2020 or any such projects have to be successful, and it has to happen now. We cannot be thinking and talking about it that, okay, let's have a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan. And I think we already have the good and the not so good available within our country. We have some iconic projects like earlier spoken, like the Delhi Metro, the Delhi Airport, the Mumbai Airport, the Mumbai-Pune Highway. These are all iconic projects which are done on time, smoothly, inclusive as far as growth is concerned. To my mind, the important aspect that project management brings in as a means to that end is process. What we need is consistency. We need to make sure that every project that comes on the table is handled and delivered in the same way. And project management is the only discipline which can describe that process, which can bring in that process, which can make it all inclusive, keeping in mind everything that needs to come together, all resources, all bodies, all agencies that need to come together to implement that project, and at the same time keep its eyes on the goals and establish this consistent project.
Yeah, I would like to differentiate two aspects. One is, the environment within which a project manager functions. So you must have the right kind of a policy environment, the right kind of an environment which empowers the project manager to take decision and act and manage the project properly. And secondly, the project manager itself, in managing or implementing an individual project is important. It's not just enough to make per chart. You have to make a very detailed implementation strategy You have to give attention to details, and you have to really have the delegate powers and authority to different people and keep them monitor and make them accountable. That is the crux of the problem.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Parekh. Maybe I can come to you next.
I would recommend that we address all the phases of project execution, starting from the concept or pre-execution phase, which could include things like selection criteria, the permitting process, the contracting terms, and each one of these have several aspects. Then moving on to the engineering and design execution phase, where we can need to talk about things like poor project definition, the lack of phasing of project execution, the absence of a robust change management process, of course the inadequacy of engineering management and project management, talent, knowledge management. And then moving on to the procurement phase, where I think we could talk about aggressive negotiated pricing, poor supply chain integration, poor off-the-shelf design, and introducing the concept of best country or global sourcing. And finally, the aspect of construction, which needs to be brought up front, and maybe talk about concepts like dispersed construction, introducing the concept of modular construction versus everything being stick-built at site, the concept of undertaking craft and supervisor skill and availability surveys prior to starting a contract, integrating logistics with supply contracts, and again, even things like heavy lifts and others. So I believe we need to address each one of these to be really able to get understand all the facets of project management and how we can improve its efficacy.
I would say that we need to relook into our procedures and the policies in which we are going, and probably we are caught with it due to the procedural inefficiencies. And we must look at how a project can be executed and how we can enable treating the other part, which is your contractor, as your partner in the business. Because if he fails, you are bound to fail. And therefore, I would say that planning is very necessary. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And that is probably what is happening. And at last, I would say that there are always three sides one has to look in. One is the contractor's version, other is the employer's version, but there is a third version, which is the right version. And we must look into that, what is the right version, and then draft your documents, etc., and policies in accordance.
Digital India is an aspirational vision. And to translate that vision, which has basically three attributes to it. It says transformation, obviously, of the way the government's machinery works. Empowerment of the stakeholders, basically the citizens. And the knowledge economy part, which is looking at India as a whole, how does it benefit from technology being used as a tool to translate this vision into actual outcome for the stakeholders. The technology typically redefines these outcomes and the processes. I think the point that made about the processes is very, very key to the whole understanding of program implementation, because in government the processes form a part of the quality of the outcome. If you deliver on time, if you deliver quality of service to the targeted population, that is where it defines whether the outcome has actually been delivered, regardless of whether you have spent money, whether each of us have actually done what we were meant to do. But ultimately, if it has not been delivered in the manner the ultimate stakeholder wants to take the service that you have delivered, I think that needs to be kept in mind when you're thinking of the whole facet of what is program implementation, and how does one actually ensure that it is implemented in the way that it was envisaged to fit into the overall goal with which you started with.
very key and crucial points being raised by each of you. I would like to go into some of those topics and probably talk about private and public, since we have representatives from both here today on the panel. And I want to ask each of you, and maybe you, ma'am, Arun, Raj, Arvind, if you all can comment in terms of what lessons public can learn from private and private can learn from public.
Key point is, how do you first, as Sharad was saying earlier, how do you incubate these projects? The planning and design of the project is most critical. If you don't design the variables in terms of how, let's say, the private sector and the government will work together, and what is the preparation done before you get the private sector in, whether it's a contractor or a developer, you will probably fail. So the incubation process involves all the designing, the engineering, the feasibility studies, as well as the policy environment which Radha was talking, which will enable you to form up how the risk sharing will be done when things go right or wrong. So I think, actually a successful government project or a private sector project, the issues are the same. So I won't really differentiate in that sense.
Can I just add to, just taking off from, your stakeholder alignment, most of the projects that have been stalled, there's a clear understanding that it's lack of stakeholder, alignment. So over the years when we started observing, whether the program has not been, going well, or, 24 water supply, like 10 years ago sort of, but the stakeholders have not been aligned. So even in physical infrastructure, let's say, people have to be brought in. So what I personally think is that we are talking about engaging stakeholders. We are talking about creating a dialogue with them, aligning with them. But of late I started thinking it's important to really do the immersion program. Really take them to the bottom of, the project or the program and tell them what they stand to gain and why they should partner. And at each stage, what is their role. So if all the stakeholders are brought onto the page and they understand right from the project conception to, along the way, to the benefits that they're going to get, every citizen is going to align, every stakeholder, so we won't have PILs, we won't have, other types of disruptions to otherwise a brilliant project or a program for the country.
We work in the private project segment, commercial real estate projects, and we actually ran a survey internally to find out, this was about 4.5 years ago, to find out what are the top parameters which come as constraints to an effective delivery of a project. You want to deliver on cost, you want to deliver on time, in quality, in a safe manner. So what is it? We asked our project managers, about 900 odd project managers, what do you think in your books is the topmost constraint that comes in the way of your delivering your projects effectively? And we were very surprised. The majority came up with one constraint, which was lack of decision making in a timely manner by the client. And if I were to use that same in context of public versus private projects, I think public projects are even more difficult because there are many stakeholders, many policies, everything needs to come together, and sometimes they're not aligned, as you said, and despite that you have to deliver a project.
Going from where Gurudot said, so if you were to trace the origins of diffidence in decision making, I think you will come back to the concept of having a good project definition, and number two, allowing for the time to have a good project definition. And once we have that, in most cases, in our, at least the large projects which we address, this does not seem to happen. And once it does happen, then having a process by virtue of which you have key sponsor involvement. So that addresses the point Karuna was making. So the key decision makers, the organizational change makers, their involvement, if it is there, we have seen on projects that the decision making is faster. And one common thread amongst all these three is evolving and accepting the need for a very strong change management process, which addresses both internal organizational led changes as well as external led changes. It could be the market, it could be the contractors, it could be the suppliers, it could be trade barriers. So if we have that, then you will have smoother project execution.
As fascinating as this conversation has been, we are racing against time. So maybe I could request for quick closing comments. I'd like to start with you, Gurjot, and ask you to talk to us whether you think that the understanding of project management is mature in India, or what the way forward is according to you.
So there is a deep understanding of what we need to do, which is the best part. I think that's a great start. I think what we need to do is implementation.
I think I agree. Devil is in the detail. That means you're really prepared a detailed implementation plan which really understands what needs to be done at what stage and who has to do it. I think that's very, very critical. You have to have the right kind of environment which doesn't obstruct people but empowers them, keeps them accountable, and have the right measure of accountability. If you do that and really do not put obstacles in the path of the manager or the person in charge, project implementer, you will get the results.
I think if the owner-contractor relationship can be more collaborative rather than adversarial, which it currently is, that it will go a long way in improving the project management outcomes that we see.
I think I would like to sum up is that one is the, of course, fair and equality with the your partners. The second word, I would say that the product should be assessed on life cycle basis rather than the L1 at this stage based on only the manufacturing, designing, construction of the project. And third thing I would say, which is to be given importance, is the skill development, because we are far, far behind. And once we set up that culture and use our common sense more than anything else, we can work out and we can make a roadmap that will be successful, and any project can be taken up and finished successfully in time and within the given constraints.
There is an acceptance that program management is a professional area that government has to institutionalize and formally put it out there. It should not be dependent on a leader suddenly coming and saying, I need a program management unit. So that option not being there, there is an increasing acceptance as a formal structure in any organization that implements programs. This is part of the program management, is a part of the organizational structure.
When I look at vision and the vision for India and project management, I think there has to be clear alignment of all stakeholders, that this is the vision, this is where we wish to go, and each person then takes on the role which is assigned to them. When it comes to funding, I don't think funding is that much of a constraint. That is the kind of impression we are seeing when we are looking at startups now coming up in a big way. And the angel investors, the venture capital, they're all willing to fund ideas which are innovative and which are having some strength behind them. The important thing for any project manager is to work on an idea and then to constantly innovate. That is because in a changing world, for you to survive, the best thing is to look at innovation, how you're going to get used to the market forces, the discipline which the market is creating for you. And in terms of funding as well, the same thing would operate.
I would like to say that government does play a huge role because the vision is of the government, and the implementing, there are a lot of multiple partners involved in this. And government can in many ways act like a tipping point. If I go by the example of NEGD and the way they have developed a very planned manner in terms of competency development, standards, and our capacity building, and hopefully a process implementation after that. And if that example can be mirrored with other ministries, I think we are on an extremely good wicket, and I don't see an issue achieving the vision in India.
Everybody's talking about this culture of project management, which is the most difficult part. I know the process, people, technology is something which you can, but creating that culture, which some have done well, is really what this thing. And that will ensure that we move from a jugaad project management, which India is known for, to actually project management as a discipline.
I don't think we can afford to work in business as usual way. we have to go in a mission mode way, for which obviously project management is completely necessary. So I would rather say it is non-negotiable. It is a Hobson's choice. We need to have it. So repositioning, rebranding is very, very important. Being aggressive and pushing through the corridors is equally important. If I were you in Project Management Institute, I would immediately call to action and tie up with Swachh Bharat and smart cities today.
Thank you.
For Vision India to deliver, we have to sell more products, more services abroad. And for that, we have to improve our efficiency, we have to improve our productivity. And for that, professional project management is the need. Project managers are not born overnight. It takes years to create a project manager with domain skills, with expertise, with EHS skills, with quality skills to actually become a project manager. And it's a holistic package. We have to invest, and we have to invest together with the government. We have to actually partner with the government so that together we can see that we can multiply our skill sets and bring the capacity what is required.
Thank you all very much for being here today and for your comments on the subject matter. Thank you.